as Mark mentioned, we are just here to start where you want to start and go where you want to go and hear your
and
story
end where you want to end.
End where you want to end. That's right. So,
All right. Well, I'm glad to be with you two, dear friends. I think this is the best titled podcast maybe of all time. I dare you to find anybody who feels luckier almost every single day, and certainly nobody more grateful to be right where I am, which that means with y'all right now. And that's how I kind of feel for some weird reason almost every hour of every day. So I'm delighted to be here and go down any road y'all wish.
awesome.
So 2 observations. First of all, you're wearing your Texas colors. Good for you.
We got a big couple weeks ahead.
I'm well aware of that. It's been a fun team to watch this year, and I historically have not been a Texas fan, but you've got a fun team to watch. The one thing that I would love to hear you articulate, and maybe you can work your story backwards from here. Your gratefulness is really an amazing quality, but there's something you tell your kids every day. And I know it because I read your stuff, but a lot of people don't. So would you articulate that and maybe tell us how you got to making that statement every day?
Well, whether it be a dance party with the girls in the kitchen on the way out, or certainly no later than when the carpool door closes. And I was lucky to build our little building 5 minutes away from their school because I like every one of those moments. But I will yell, let us attack this day with a relentless enthusiasm unknown to mankind every day. And that's not rehearsed. It's not, well, it could be awkward as they get a little older and they roll their eyes, as I told Jess last time I saw her, but I don't care. It still lands somewhere. And even if it's just for me, that's how I genuinely feel. And then we're going to go get after it. And I didn't, it started as just a natural cheer, chant, mantra. What I didn't know when my first baby girl was born, who just graduated college, so I don't get to do carpool with her anymore. What I didn't know, and was certainly unintentional, but I guess the lucky part, when I say that and really mean it, is I didn't know that now, for all sorts of reasons that I think the three of us generally agree on, I always grew up, especially in this business, time is the most valuable asset. And all of these things that are certainly more important ultimately than money and our profession that we're lucky to earn a good living from. But what I didn't know was I genuinely believe now the scarcest resource on the planet is positive energy in any room, in any family, in any business, in any building, in any moment. So I don't know how I got lucky to get that in my hardwiring, but I definitely want to share it.
So what is the origin of that statement? When did you come up with that? How long have you been doing that? Saying that?
Well, I have 5 kids, so a lot of it is a beautiful blur. And carpool in the morning it can get a little loud and messy. And so I just want to at least have some sort of bow on the end to remind, because I remember what it was like to be a kid, and it wasn't always a great day to be a 14-year-old girl going off to 8th grade, and I'm sensitive to that. So it's not an in your face, it's just a subtle, no matter what, I'm gonna be there and we're gonna hug and we're gonna grin, and there is something good. And if it's bad, and there's that too, then I've learned that the obstacle isn't in the way, it might be the way. It is the way. One of my favorite books.
Yeah, that's a good book, isn't it?
You and I share some stoic. I always say my poor man's meditation is I genuinely at any moment can take a giant deep breath, and that's the only alarm clock I've ever had in my life. I'm lucky to never have one or need one in the morning, but I do have one to remind me to breathe slowly every hour, which I turned off for this podcast. So you're an exceptional people as well. And I just breathe in gratitude so slowly, and then I try to breathe out joy. Really simple, 5 minute hack. And I can do that until I tingle. That's how lucky I feel. I really can. And I'm not a meditation guru, so do not, I don't have it, but that's how I feel for some weird lucky reason.
We can get Tom Morgan out here to talk to us about all that. And Dave
Yeah.
Noddick.
Woo factor.
Big meditation, guys.
Yeah.
So Ryan, obviously you have your firm and the Mbox fund and all that. But how did you get there? How did you get started?
Well, I think one of your favorite stories, and I told you, my only fear with this, Jess, is nobody has a better box of stories than your buddy Mark. So
not true.
It's undefeated. But I think some of the similar
He
paths.
remembers literally everything. Everything. That's
too.
why his box of stories is so incredible.
Let me retranslate that. Once he gets going, he tells you a bunch of things you don't want to know. So you have to be really patient.
Hey, and he's a hard nut to crack, Jess. I remember the first time, and as you get down the road just a little bit, I hope just at halftime of life for me, you got to get a little more intentional about this stuff. And I remember getting to know him just a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to fly across the country just to have dinner with this dude. And I got really challenged when I realized he's not a hugger like me. So my mission was for him to get what was previously very comfortable when I tell him I love him. And I do, and I hug him. And he's warming up to me just a little bit. But
I still have a Kevlar suit on, but he doesn't know that.
But back to your question, which is a common link, I think we all have figured out some way that I realized and learned from a couple of heroes of mine that discomfort could be a gift. And I don't know a single successful story that I get to work for these amazing families and businesses now, which also is lucky. I don't know a single one of them started from a place of too much comfort. So maybe my luckiest break of all was I never had one either. I think and probably one of your favorite stories is I never even had a resume because I was declined the interview at the biggest and best Wall Street firm that I dreamed of working at out of school. And so that was a little bit it wasn't even a setback because we weren't even started yet. So I didn't have anything to be sad over. I didn't have any backup plans. So I wrote what I still consider and call the Hail Mary that I have in my little museum of capitalism here to the manager. And I said, I understand that there will be no interviews, but I would just like to come by and visit. And somehow, some way, charmed my way into that office with no interview, with no resume. And I figured I was just going to somehow refuse to leave. And I started in the mailroom. And I taught a finance class for a professor at my kids' high school a couple of weeks ago, and none of them could believe that my first year's salary was less than any one of those kids' tuition. So go hug your parents too. Express a little gratitude every once in a while. And I just never left. So I never produced a resume because I never wanted another job outside of the mailroom. Once I started, I wanted to be a portfolio manager. At the time in 96, there wasn't a whole lot of this holistic planning and different dimensions, at least from the little bit part of Wall Street that I knew and loved. And I was just a quantitative math nerd, and thankfully earned just a little bit of trust from folks and started from there, and never really, the reason I never had another resume, I never wanted to change firms. I never wanted another job. I just wanted to grind. And then finally leaving and launching an independent firm, also starting at zero again, willing to grind with a little bit of luck. And I just celebrated with the attorney that helped us break out of Shawshank, as I like to call it. And that's exactly how it felt, because inside those walls, and I had the best of experiences from 96 to 06. I think the great Wall Street, the Shawshank quote was, I had to go to prison to learn how to become a criminal. Thankfully, I did nothing wrong. I honored the trust. I've never broken a promise, but a lot of the characters, as we all know, in that world at that time, they did some bad things. So it made the regular job that I signed up for a little harder and harder. And I remember, I'll never forget, I could no longer sign your partner at the end of a letter. I could no longer tell people who trusted me where 100% of my own money was. And that was my only oath and simple formula. So that was the only deal breaker I needed. So I didn't want to go to another firm and get a big bonus check for some weird reason. I wanted to start from scratch. So we did and never looked back. And it just added, um, I tell people now because now it's a different season for me because I thought the coolest day in the world is when you put your name on the door in that independent firm. And I realized an even cooler next dimension was when I took my name off the door because I wanted to attract a better team and people that if I was a superstar, I wouldn't want to work under somebody's name. I want to work under a mission. And so I'm actually more excited for some weird lucky reason about the next 30 years than the first 30. And it was a pretty good run so far.
I'm going to dig in a little deeper.
Yeah, go.
How did you get out of the mailroom to being a portfolio manager at a major Wall Street firm?
I laugh because, I had all these fancy, at the time, I think I put all of whatever little money I had into this thick Sears suit. So I dressed the part, even when I was in the mailroom. And even though I was loading up big, like scuba tank sized, whatever the carbon was to use Xerox copies. Because, when I wasn't stuffing mail, I was binding these big, beautiful presentations for all these brokers. And occasionally I would, I would miss, I'm not very mechanical like you, by the way, Newfield. So I don't know how to do a lot of stuff like that. So I would spill it and I'd have a bunch of coal dust on me. I look more like a coal miner than a broker.
That stuff is toxic, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I give, in hindsight, for all of the different things that Wall Street has done wrong, I have to honor some of the amazing lucky breaks and what they did right that would be impossible to do over again. There was a lot of discretion given at that time to do whatever you wanted if you could survive. So I didn't have a handed down model when I didn't get an office, of course, I got a cubicle. But there was not a handed down model that you have to do these portfolios, these funds. There was some discretion if you wanted to say, let's keep this unbelievably simple and buy a tax-free school bond and an individually managed stock portfolio with anybody that trusts you, which was next to nobody for me at that time. If you did start from zero and ended up with anything, that they supported you. And I give them so much credit because you couldn't do that again today. And for a lot of good reasons. Most people would misuse that. And what's even funnier and cooler in hindsight is all of those big presentations that I saw walk out the door, those complex and confusion that now I realize was manufactured for a reason by Wall Street. Actually, that simple, beautiful stock and bond portfolio remains the core of our entire operation to this day. And those beautiful, simple organic ingredients that thankfully a very disciplined system can do very well. There's a lot of people that don't need a lot more complexity than that. So really the next 10 years, just by watching and observing and staying curious, I learned more of what isn't needed than all these new things that people do need. People get wealthier. They don't need more stuff. The holy grail is deeply informed simplicity.
I'm sorry, Jess, go ahead.
No, I want to clarify Wall Street. By Wall Street, you mean New York City Wall Street, not Texas version of Wall Street, which I've heard from other guests too. Like there's kind of their own little bubbles of Wall Street where we can, and I know you're in Texas now, so you were in New York City at the time.
The training was, when I say Wall Street, I mean the big Wall Street firms. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, although I have nothing but love and respect for the people that, and I still manage money for some of them and I'm still friends with all of them. But at the time, the biggest firm on Wall Street, and yes, did training in New York and there was some in Hartford at that time. But I started in Houston, Texas, which is where I am to this day.
Yeah. Because during that time period, this is part of why I was asking that question. during that time period where you would have been working for this large firm that did have its base in New York City, 2001 happened. And so you would have either had to weather that in person or weather that alongside your colleagues who were there in person. And I just wanted to get maybe just a little insight on how that
Yeah.
time period was for you.
Yeah, I was here in Houston, and there's been several crisis storms, and from, earth shaking. And down here, we go through those every couple of years. We were the financial crisis firms, these big giant firms going out of business while there was hurricanes, and we didn't have homes like on the same week. So yeah, we've been through a lot for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, the the pressure of that alongside the pressure of building your career alongside, as you've noted, having 5 kids. Um, where do you where do you find the balance in all of that? What does that word mean to you? What does balance mean to you? Um,
I I think about that a lot, and I tried to get a little intentional about if one of those storms ever did wipe me off the planet, leaving a couple of notes. And I'm a big playbook guy, sharing operating systems mainly because I learned so much from others that I like jotting down notes. So I actually formally wrote a letter to my oldest daughter for graduation about your question, because I think, and I'm a little bit like your buddy Newfield. I have a little bit of an odd, uncrowded way of thinking about things. Some people would call us delightfully odd. But those uncrowded paths, uncrowded trades have served me very well professionally and personally. So if I could share any version of that with her or anybody, and look, an uncrowded path, which in Wall Street usually sets up for unusual opportunities, right, where there's not agreement, but it also, by definition, is not cleared. It's not clear. So for a young graduate, I actually think it's a little harder than when you started, like I did. I remember Jensen Wong addressing Stanford's graduates saying that you all have incredibly high expectations, and you should, because you're the smartest people at the smartest schools, arguably, and you're surrounded by nothing but success. And do you know what comes with those high expectations that you certainly should have? Pause, low resiliency. And as he was probably about to get shoved off stage by whoever invited him, he was saying, and I know you'll agree with this, my fondest wish for you is great pain and suffering. I've washed more dishes and cleaned more toilets than everybody in this room combined. And this is the leader of the biggest company, most successful rocket ship that they all dreamed of being, but they're skipping that part. Understandably, who would want to? So I wrote this letter to my daughter, and I ended up sharing it with our partners for all their kids, and it's up on our site in our Grindex section, which is ends up being all of our partners' most favorite. They get past my boring stock and bond stuff, and they want to go to the real good stuff, the adventure capital account. But I talked about balance because I actually, here's my uncrowded, unpopular thought. And I opened the letter with, this will be my least popular idea of all time to share. So do with that as you wish. But I think people are looking for balance too early. And when I started, there was no PTO. There was no flexible work schedule. There was no remote. And all of those things have a place and a purpose, and they're wonderful. But I said one uncrowded path to consider for a young person would be give yourself the grace and permission to obsess. That's a different PTO. If you did want to find a craft, and you might fail miserably and try a couple of different things, which was also part of the letter. Don't worry too much or be intimidated by follow your passion. I hate those graduation speeches. I think they're misleading. I think they're intimidating to a young person who might not know what their passion is. Try as many different likes before you know what you love. That's in people and businesses, because I don't think a passion is something you choose. I think it's something you collide with. So I said, what if you gave yourself a permission to obsess about your work, and you weren't asking about the benefit package on day one or your time off, but you just dove in and outworked everybody. That's all I knew. So I said that could work again. And might it even be more valuable today than ever? But that also means, to me, it's a beautiful imbalance is the answer to your question, not balance, which is not to make a mistake. I race to play with the people and that family and that growing kids, all those growing kids. But I want to be there, obsessed there. And I think the balance riddle that people are at work wishing they were doing something else at home, and they're at home, they're wishing they had really done a little bit better job at work. And so there's no balance for a reason. So maybe be a little odd, be a little different, and give yourself an unbelievable imbalance of being all in wherever you are at work and then at home and in play. And that's my simple formula. So I wanted to share it with her, and in case it might be of interest to her or any of her little brothers and sisters.
And so for those of you in the audience, if you want to find this little missive of our friend Mr. Krueger, it is to be found if you Google the worst job advice for graduates. You will find this.
How's that for an uncrowded?
In a more formal strategy. So Ryan, it's 2006. Presumably you had a couple of clients from the big Wall Street firm, that you had earned their trust and they followed you, but you were starting from scratch. Now it's 2024, almost 2025. You've got an exchange traded fund that you run as the portfolio manager, right? MBOX. You've got your firm. I hadn't been on your site recently, but boy, have you grown in just a couple of years that we've known each other. That's 18 years. How did that happen?
I think of it in dimensions and seasons now. And I, as you might guess, I don't like traditional financial planning either. So I like to have progress updates of seasons, not financial reviews and plans. And no client ever asked for a quarterly performance report. We did all of that stuff to ourselves. What people want, they want solutions to problems. So the name Freedom Day Solutions comes to honor them. And I specifically don't like retirement planning because I don't think it should be an age or an asset number. I think it can be any age based on free cash flow exceeding all needs and wants. Because also people should be free to work or do something longer than traditional retirement age. So we do things very non-traditionally in that respect. So all we've done in that time, to answer your question, is I still sit in the same corner, same seat on the investment side, and we have the same two simple portfolios, believe it or not, that I started out with. We have the equity portfolio. All we did was divide the compounders, the significant growth, unconstrained upside, actively managed portfolio, and then we divided out the what I affectionately call mailbox money, the dividend growth stocks. We did end up formalizing that in an ETF to share it with more. And then next to that, our fixed income account, that's where the entirety of all of our assets are. We do it all in-house, all actively managed, but then we added financial planning, a team of experts, not me. So from that investment management in-house, the planning in all sorts of problem solving, and I just use myself as a guinea pig with skin in the game at every way, which is the ultimate question. Anytime I ever want to interview an ace, what is your edge and where is your own skin in the game? Whether it be my car mechanic, what he's doing, or my portfolio manager, same question. And then what I call the holy trinity of investment management, financial planning, really that third element. Very few choose to do both of those in-house, but then a real partner, a significant, unusually successful family or business. Their next question should be, now what? What about the proactive communication? What's next? Kind of that plan in the investment management, it's kind of one-dimensional. So the ongoing direct knee-to-knee communication was the third piece of that holy trinity for us, and we needed a team to do that. And then, frankly, what lights me on fire and why I love not knowing what's going to happen next is what I would consider the fourth dimension of all of this, which I know we share in common, which is, all right, a lot of that stuff is not terribly motivating or thrilling to a lot of wildly successful people. Where could we get really intentional and formalize an adventure capital account, formalize a Grindex, which we affectionately, that was my final polite middle finger tip of the cap to Wall Street and the thousands of indexes. Like, why doesn't any of them measure peace of mind and what we're actually going to do that will outlive us all in memory bank deposits for others? And an entire wall of our building is from those pictures, those stories that genuinely light me on fire. And there's not a week that goes by here that I don't have goosebumps underneath tears in one of those meetings. And I mean that sincerely.
If I were to loosely summarize that, I'm going to use something.
Good luck. No chance.
Well, we'll see. And you can stomp all over it if you like. But I've adopted a phrase from Ted Klontz, not Brad. That is the way we describe this sort of planning, which is figuring out how to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for however long you want, without having to worry about what the money does.
Amen.
Yeah. That's what we've evolved. We don't call it retirement planning either. I mean, we do to folks because that's a term that people know, but that's the philosophy I think that you've adopted over time. And then you've built out this team over the last 18 years to do that, right? From being really good at managing money to being really good at helping people achieve their desired outcome.
And look, let's not skip over the common theme that we all share. And to get to that place, a lot of people would love to talk about the dreams and the wishes. And the reason I formalized that Grindex was actually some of the best feedback we had from a very successful female leader of a house who actually said, what if we don't know what our dream is yet?
Right.
And I was like, you know what? We do just, it's not walking down the beach. And I hate stock photos. That's why you won't see any of those on our website either for everybody when their hair is silver. It might be different things. It might be a donor advised fund and getting knee deep into the weeds with really, really helping and giving. It might be the simplest, cheapest adventure to the most wildly expensive, but it's easy to talk about that stuff. But the common theme for all these people, and I don't take any credit for it, they, like us, grinded to get there. And so part of that class that I taught for high schoolers, who I'm guessing are dreaming of the NVIDIAs of the world and how do I get rich fast to go do all of this stuff, like, wait a minute, let's not skip the part. And I showed a picture of a plumber lying on the floor underneath my sink who's a millionaire. And he's a craftsman. He loves what he does. And most graduates are not thinking about some of those, and they were shocked to learn. And 2 days ago, we had a call on Zoom interrupted by noise in the background. It was a gentleman's helicopter. He make doors. We have another guy that picks up trash. All three of those, the plumber, the door guy, and the trash guy, are three of the wealthiest people that we work for. Significantly more than professionals that a lot of people are in graduate schools to do. So that grinding part, the common theme there, I also have noticed that I would have never back on Wall Street dreamed of working for a plumber, a door, an HVAC, a trash guy as 8 and 9 figure businesses. But the common theme I have noticed and loved, and the lucky, when I said lucky earlier, they love their craft and they worked hard. They're too busy to watch the news or get worried. They love what they do and who they are with, the secret formula, and success found them and they just grinded. Now, were they each on uncrowded paths that were not shiny cufflinks and suits? Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. And I still think some of those are overlooked businesses.
There is, I think, zero question in my mind anyway, that not everybody should go to college. Not everybody wants to go. And there are craftspeople who are more talented than some of the most sophisticated quants you will find in our business. I mean, there's a Lamborghini Miura behind me on the wall. The folks that conceived of that and put that together are unbelievably brilliant. And there are people doing that stuff today, whether it be Singer, the folks who do the Porsche restorations. I mean, just mechanically. I'm with you there 100%. And by the way, being the owner of a 1939 house, a skilled plumber is worth $1 gazillion.
And a couple of these play out in the stock market too. There's some uncrowded companies. Yeah. I gave a gift to an unbelievable female superstar of one of those businesses just last night. I gave her a Flo bobblehead and told her she didn't know the backstory of, I think, one of the most successful, powerful CEOs in the country of Progressive, who started her career as an adjuster for the insurance company underneath crumpled cars. Again, no different than the mailroom. That was not beneath her. Right. She grinded her way to extraordinary success. And I love sharing those stories. You and I both agree, nonfiction is so much more fun than anything else.
One kind of common theme that I see in all the people that you're describing, who, I'll say this as a blanket statement, it may not apply individually, but it seems to be they're content with their work. And they've amassed wealth that provides them a lifestyle that they are enjoying or could enjoy. They all have found a skill or a craft or a lane of work that when they engage in it, they know that it provides meaning and value to the world. And sometimes I feel like that might be a part of the disconnect with people who are on a search for a job that just produces wealth alone, is that it's a lot more intangible for them for understanding how what they're doing is providing meaning to the world. Either they are missing it with their family, they don't have that meaning inside their family, or they're missing it in their work culture, or just directly missing it but in their work itself, because it's on a Zoom call all day or across a screen, or not that screens are, but we're having a wonderful conversation over the screen right now. But I just can't help but point that out, that it seems really important.
I think you picked that up great. I think we all agree. And that's why earlier I call it a craft for me and them by design, not a job. Because I also did a post on the very best pizza I ever ate with the chef, which is another good life hack. Don't ask for the menu. Sit knee to knee with the craftsman. What are they eating? What are the freshest ingredients? Same way to hire a money manager. And right behind him was this giant sign that I put up on the site, respect the craft. All of these people, females and males, that have something that for whatever reason, luck or design, that it's not a job. I mean, it is I call this, when I get to go to the workshop, I mean, it is no mistake, it is a grind sometimes, but I also feel like it's Santa's workshop. I really do feel like that. So I think, and then you're never looking at the time, you're never looking at the age. It's easy to say that you're not looking at the money. Of course, people need money. Included in that letter, the other bad job advice is, some people say that it's not about the money. You know what? Try it before you say that, because money does help just a little bit. And be unapologetic about that. I wrote probably the most read piece was how much is enough, because I only think there's two questions, all of this. How much is enough, and how do I know I'm going to be okay, and all the people counting on me. Those are the only two financial planning, wealth management questions that matter at all. And I'll never forget, my pastor described it as, well, it's what you have. And I do believe that is the definition of happiness, which you alluded to earlier, is not getting what you want. It's really fiercely wanting exactly what you've got. That is happiness to me. So the pastor said, and I think there's a lot of truth to this, and even the Bible talks about money quite a bit, so it's okay to talk about money. He said, you have as much as you need because it's what you have, and that's right. But let's not, because what changed the last several years versus when I started my career is capitalism almost got a bad rap, and there was like accusations of being evil, and that it was interfering with health and balance and all these. You know what? If somebody wants to be on fire to go make more money, to go share and do more good, I think that is incredibly not only profitable and wonderful to make, but it's faithful. It makes a bigger impact. So let's, I think, be unapologetic about going and doing more good, which is why I wanted to formally define that Grindex is if you do take worry out, divide it over your time that remains over your real gift, your real purpose. And some people don't know what that is yet because you haven't unlocked that subconscious because you don't have the peace of mind yet. But when you do, if you then multiply it by new relationships, whether it be people right around you that can help or outside, then, oh my gosh, you have this treasure chest of memory deposits in others that by definition will outlive and outlast all of us, and exponentially a good reason to go back to work and do more good, which is inspiring for some people.
I love that. I want you to talk a little bit more about this mailbox money concept. That was my first introduction to you, in a real way, because we had connected through Twitter, through social. How I found Mark as well, probably how I'm even still around today. It's just through so many relationships, wonderful relationships that I found on Twitter. And you were one of them. And I remember when I took the job, I got offered that job at Alpha Architect. I reached out to you, and you were one of the very first to celebrate with me. And I didn't even know what your role and piece and all of that was yet, because you hadn't disclosed that to me. And so as I came on board with Alpha Architect, I learned a little bit more about you. You reached out, shared your mailbox money concept. And I just remember going, man, this guy has really developed his why behind his job. And not only obviously is he successful in his job and in his career, he's smart, he knows the math, but there's a deep meaning that he has spent a lot of time with and taken that long walk through the woods with. And that came out to me in your mailbox money concept. And so I want to make sure we dive into that, because again, that was the first moment I was like, okay, I got to figure out, I got to stay close to this guy and make sure I know what he's doing and where he's going, because he's doing the right things for the right reasons in this industry.
Well, that means a lot to me. So thank you. But you also stood out, which is easy for us, when you're surrounded by a bunch of hardcore, awesome nerds over there with big giant hearts, which is a good place to start and end any business negotiation. So when we formed that ETF, it was an easy decision. Although I'm a slow mover, it took me several years of kicking tires and doing due diligence. But you stood out because you're like, oh my gosh, we actually talk about human being stuff on the side of all those
Yeah.
sharp pencils and calculators, and was immediately drawn to you and your uncommon warmth and desire to really talk about what matters. But yeah, the hardcore, again, you can't skip through the hardcore math of what people really hire us for, is to make sure they don't have worries just because I tell them not to. It's not emotional, it's math.
Right.
And all I did observing along the way was, to me, and they're experts over there at all the different factors of investing, well, objectively, with none of my opinions, objectively, dividend growth has stood the test of time and outperformed every other factor with zero active management included. If you were to include sell disciplines and selection, I think, and we've proven, you could do even considerably better. But just as a starting point, the pure objective math, and I didn't start knowing that. I of course started, and we were in the 90s. We're talking about growth, and there's nothing wrong with the unconstrained upside. And we do have a compounders account for that. But the dividend growth in particular, to answer your question, I just kept doing the math. I kept writing in my diary. I kept notes. I shared some of it. And what Newfield and I like on the side is we're also hoop junkies. So I once wrote the Mikan drill for the stock market, and that is George Mikan. And it was about an explosion in analytics in basketball. And I always like to compare it to something that's a little bit more fun than math. Although I think both are fun, but I'm a little weird. So I said, with all of this billions of dollars, all the way down to youth basketball, which I was involved in, all centered around training for the smart shots now, which was the corner threes. And Newfield, you know what I'm talking about. I, once again, cannot help but think in uncrowded ways. And I asked one of the high school coaches who's now teaching in the layup lines, instead of finishing a layup like you and I grew up with, they're kicking it out to the 3-point corner. And I just about lost my mind. I mean, you're teaching a 12, 13, 14. Thankfully, my volunteer time at the time was I coached basketball, so I could do it a different way. But I was watching and I couldn't help but ask him, I was like, have you ever measured the corner three? Again, back to my love of simple math and objectivity. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you know, it's not shorter anywhere but in the NBA. So while Daryl Morey and all the analytics since then said the short corner was a optimal factor of basketball, yes, it was a little bit of an advantage when it was an uncrowded trade. Now defenses know what they're doing. But I said, everybody took that movement to mean that it was also what they should be doing. I was like, you take out a tape measure, it's not any shorter. You're actually teaching the wrong thing and you're missing. And now what was uncrowded was the layup, the simple 2-pointer. In the stock market, I couldn't help but notice the same thing. So a simple, boring, a lot of people would pass it, 2% dividend yield. Let's just keep it with Mikan for a second. And Mikan's backstory, by the way, is also incredible. But what if that's an uncrowded trade? And I nerded out with like all of these 2-pointers that are now uncrowded in basketball. What about in the stock market? Does anybody even know that the highest quality dividend growth model can not only outperform, although that's actually not the reason I would do it. What if those little 2-pointers start adding up, just like they do on the scoreboard in basketball? That 2%, if it's growing, very different than a dividend yield model. What if in 5 or 10 years, you're getting 8, 9, 10% yield on cost, which is my mailbox math to keep things simple, back of the envelope. You do not need an institutional grade 48-page relative performance smoke and mirrors show, back of the envelope from the guy who started the mailroom. So there's a little tip of the cap to the mailbox money too. If you're growing your dividend and nothing else changes, you get no help from the stock market. It doesn't go up an inch because I have a severe allergy to the withdrawal rate. I think that is doomed to fail for too many models. I've seen it. I started on Wall Street when financial plans were walking out the door that says the market goes up 11%, you should take out 8. Those are the biggest invest plans at that time. So along came several years later the safe withdrawal rate, which was considerably better, but it's still flawed because if you read the footnotes in the bottom of those reports, this simulation has an 80%. Well, hold on. So if you tell me 1 out of every 5 times I drive home, I'm not going to get there, are you okay with that financial plan? So I shared that Mikan drill. Somebody, again, kindness of strangers, read it. They happened to be hoop junkies, flew across the country and said, you should do an ETF. I had never even thought about doing that. I was so happy with what I was already doing for people. And I definitely did not know how expensive and time consuming it was for me.
Yeah.
But once I learned the operational efficiency and the tax efficiency, I couldn't unlearn that. Mm-hmm. So even if it would be a pay cut for me personally, as my best way of staking a flag in the ground, said, I am with you people for the next 30 years. There was no way I couldn't do it for them. So It's been an unbelievably wonderful experience. And also it was a way to also share and show that, you know what, it's not, don't take my word for it. Just stick to the math. And we've been lucky to get, you know, I didn't set out. I used to tell people don't pay attention to performance and Morningstar. I still would. But when you get 5 stars as a little bitty startup from nothing on the 3-year anniversary, it made me feel pretty good. And I can't wait to do more.
That's amazing. I love the math. I'm also closet math nerd. Love to go deep on concepts. The thing that stood out to me about the mailbox money was you describing it as that sense of security, in the sense that, like, I can, like, when you go to the mailbox and you know that paycheck from work is going to be there, and kind of the correlation of that to the dividend strategy for people who are dependent on a certain amount of income on a month to month basis, if they are in that, retirement or a stage of life where they have an income need, and how that piece of the puzzle is also very important when you're talking about financial planning. Like, there is a piece, and typically this happens with a retirement planning conversation, where you look at the client and you say, what do you need to have every month forever for the rest of your life? And how can we nail that amount down for you? In the past, a lot of products were used to create that stability. So security may have been a part of that, an annuity, other products that were going to send them that amount each month at great cost to them. And one of the things that I love about using a dividend strategy in that type of planning is that, to your point, it can be well balanced within a more tax efficient plan. If you're using an ETF, it can provide that stable income that a client is looking for. And it is, that at the end of the day, creates and keeps optionality for other life changes that are coming in the future, which are typically more closed off if you're going to use a product like an annuity or an insurance withdrawal strategy. So there's just a lot of really thoughtful aspects to your approach. And again, I still consider myself a baby. I don't have the decades and decades of experience that Mark does. And so that really struck me, at that time, that there's multiple ways of thinking outside the box of what others are doing and saying works best for clients. And some of those outside the box thoughts are ones that need to just run right through you. But as I kept running through what you had built and what you were doing, it stayed with me that this is a thoughtful approach and a meaningful approach for people.
I think this should never have anything to do with what guys like me like or are good at or want. I think it should be entirely based on what people need.
Yeah.
And as I looked out on the landscape and thought about the next 30 years compared to the last 30, to be clear, this is in combination with insured risk-free income streams. But next to that, I do think, because the world did not need another product or ETF. I am quite clear of that. And I didn't need to go into this steel cage match of David and Goliath, making that look like an even matchup compared to what I was up against. But what I did think, I think there's a problem that we could solve. So instead of another growth or income product, I do believe what most people need, whether they want it or not. And I don't know that they can articulate. When you said, and that's another issue I have with financial planning. Tell me what you feel conservative, aggressive, like, what do you think you need? I don't know how to tell my doctor what I want or need. I want you to tell me what I should be thinking about ahead of time. So in that case, I think instead of growth or income, I think what more people will need more than anything else for the next 30 years is growth of income. So I think building simple playbooks around that concept and everything that it kind of unleash that we like talking about earlier was a problem to solve rather than a product to launch. And I'm excited to do that.
I love that. It's great.
I also think it happened that the stock market nerd and any of us listening, my hand in the air for that too, is it is also the best. And this is the book I'm working on. I think it's the stock market's best clue there's a reason they outperform these companies and all of the math and stakeholder friendly characteristics of how to run a business, raising a dividend significantly, which is very different than a dividend yielding stock, which the argument, and I've heard good arguments, devil's advocate here, a dividend stock has nothing better to do with the money. Well, That's true and there's several dividend funds and ETFs that have 3, 4, 500 different holdings. And if you ask very simple questions like which of them are even raising their dividend by 1% or greater, growing their top line at 2% or greater, and free cash flow, and paying the dividend with less than 100% of free cash flow, there's 100 names. And these dividend funds own hundreds and hundreds of these. So I do believe that my counter to any of those arguments is if you are selective and if you do happen to believe in active management, which I think we all do, it's not a choice. It's just how you define it. And with disciplines, every one of us are active managers, whether we own indexes or not. In this case, if a company is able to raise its dividend after also growing substantially and investing in more CapEx and paying off or down debt and buying back stock, I don't think it has to be one or the other. If you believe in selection, you could find companies that happen to be doing all of those. And objectively, with evidence, those are the best clues oftentimes for companies that are doing exceptionally well. And if you can find some of them that are uncrowded and not well agreed upon, then Katie, bar the door.
Love that.
And you raised a very good point, which I would suspect that the great majority of clients and many advisors don't understand. Indexing is an active strategy. Now, why is that? Well, round numbers, I think there are 3 million indexes. The choice of selecting an index is an active decision.
An action.
There are 3 small cap indexes that I was looking at this last week. The average difference in 10-year performance between the 3 small cap indexes, 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Well-known small cap indexes.
Mm-hmm.
The S&P 600, the Russell 3000, and then there's another one, I can't remember the name. But the average
try emerging markets. Try emerging markets.
The average difference year over year is 5%. I think their mid-cap indexes actually is 5%. So the choice of selecting an index is an active decision.
Yep.
How many indexes you use in your portfolio? Do you go large cap and fixed income only? Do you do large cap, small cap, mid cap, international emerging, international developed, and fixed income? Within fixed income, do you do 2 or 3? Those are all active decisions. And guess what? The index itself is actively managed. There are people out there that are rolling their eyes right now. Well, let me just pose this to you. How long did Tesla qualify from a capitalization perspective to be in the S&P 500 before it was added? I think the answer is 6 years. And the reason why is that the index committee at that point in time, and who knows who was on the index committee, had made a decision that you had to have four quarters of consecutive profitability before you could be added, regardless of your capitalization.
Well, the index committee, the former index committee, is that the
Yes.
current SEC committee?
I don't know if it's the current S&P 500 index committee or
no.
not.
No, I'm saying, is it the current football SEC committee?
Oh.
Or the CFP committee? Is that the same people who are on that index board? Are they now
it's either that or
the members
it's the
of the CFP committee?
Either that or it's the NCAA tournament committee that chooses the last 4 in. But in any case, there is an incredible amount of active management that occurs in designing the index itself. So for those of you who think you are passive investors, and I'll dunk on real estate investors too, because real estate investing is not passive. It's active. You just don't know how active it is.
And here's an uncrowded thought that I've always, you can't outperform the index, regardless of exceptions with active managers that have proven that can happen. The overwhelming odds, and for most people, you could do a lot worse than just own. There's a reason.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. I'm just saying it's not passive.
There's a reason, and I couldn't agree more. There's a reason that these things are flourishing, but I can't help but think, and the lesson I like to share, even the youngest of investors, if everybody's lining up at the store, honey, what about buying or owning a stake of the store rather than being a customer? So as this table of 3 million indexes you just described and Wall Street's craps table of everybody putting the chips on the table and all of these with all of their different opinions. What about taking a one step back and uncrowded thought? And I always call it being the rake. Look at the performance of the parent companies licensing those indexes compared to the indexes that you're supposed to not be able to beat. They've crushed them also with rising dividends.
Absolutely crushed
Just an uncrowded thought. Some people don't even know the names of those parent companies. That's how uncrowded it is.
Right. Oh, the MSCI is a very profitable entity. It's a very good point.
And companies, and the beautiful thing about active management, which is the reason I think it's not a choice, things change. Companies change. They change. One of those indexing licensing companies was a book company publishing books at one time. That wasn't a very profitable business. They pivoted. I find fascinating the best pivots in life and in businesses. And at that intersection of uncertainty is usually where the biggest opportunities are before it is clear.
Sure. Yeah. So what pivot are you going to make now? Where does Ryan go next?
Question on my mind. I love it.
Well, I mean, I'm terrible at answering this question only because I meant what I say, as always, of being
in the moment,
genuinely happy and on fire to be right where I am. And I've learned as part of that poor man's meditation, if you really think for a second about not worrying about the big picture or what's next, my gosh, does that give that breath a little bit longer to last? So I said earlier, I love not knowing what's going to happen next when I walk in the door every day. I love that part of this job. I am genuinely more excited about opportunities now because of the team. And I love being a smaller piece of that table in some cases. That's a good feeling. So I'm really excited to share more and do more with good people. And as a small business owner, what I didn't know at the beginning is I actually get excited about changing more lives here internally, not just the people that we work for, to get to see them and make a huge impact on their lives is very meaningful for me. So I really do feel like I'm just getting started, which is a weird thing to say, but maybe at halftime, maybe we'll see what the next half holds. I can't wait to find out.
Well, all I can say is I've got a few years on you and a lot more years on Jess. And I find that to be fundamentally true as well. And I very much appreciate you taking the time to come talk with us today. I hope you found it fun and interesting and enjoyable.
It was my honor and true delight. And you know how I feel about both of you, and your idea and sharing this with really good people is pretty cool, and it's fun. And fun is an underrated part of a business plan.
The fact of the matter is, if you ain't having fun, you ought to be thinking about doing something else. That's for sure.